So today I want to talk about writing and living a writerly life. I asked for questions yesterday because I had posted about kind of my journey as a writer. And if you know me mostly through podcasting, you actually might not know that I had started my career as a writer in my mid-20s so 20 years ago, when I was pregnant with my third. I had dabbled a little bit. I think at that point I had had like one essay published in Brainchild magazine. I think that might have been it at that point. And I knew I enjoyed it. I knew I had some raw talent. I just thought I wanted a more flexible life and more flexibility and sanity around my work schedule. I had little kids. I was pregnant with my third. And things were really hectic. I was working a 9-to-5 office job and I felt like I had no margins, no time, was just not happy with where I was. And so I had this, I wouldn't even call it a skill at that point. It was like a fledgling skill. But I knew that I loved to write, and I had started to kind of get an idea that freelance writing is a thing that people do and can make money at, and that you could live anywhere. You didn't have to be living in New York City, which I think was what I had always thought before that. And so that was like a whole journey to learning. And I will also say that in those days, this was like early internet, pre-social media, pre-blogging even, people just weren't, it wasn't exactly pre-blogging. Like I had a blog for a while, but it was definitely pre professional blogging. Blogging had not been professionalized, and it wasn't something you did at that point to make money from. And there wasn't the readiness, like the readily available resources that there are now. There was Google, but it was pretty rudimentary, and like the resources you would get connected with were pretty new and limited. So it was a lot of learning. And I wrote in the post yesterday in my feed about just how I sort of started, and then for 10 years really considered myself a writer first and was widely published. I published several books before I think the last book I published, I was 33, maybe 34 when that published. So I did a lot in a short window of time and then just kind of stopped writing for lots of reasons. I had a lot going on in my life that I just clammed up about, didn't want to write about, didn't know how to write about, and I felt like the stories I had been telling were no longer true. So that was like a big change for me, and have really just been slowly crawling back toward it over the past few years, writing things like Instagram posts, content for my blog, the occasional story that I'll pitch somewhere, and copywriting for clients and things like that. But that's a little bit different than the kind of writing I'm talking about today. So I'm excited to dig in. I got a few questions that I'm going to answer. And really quick though, I did want to tell you about the tea I'm drinking today. So this is from Light of Day Organics. It's called Sunday Morning. I really have been kind of slowly drinking this tea because it's so special. It's got chamomile flowers in it and chrysanthemum flowers, not chamomile flowers. Very different. And it's made by a farm really, in northern Michigan, the Traverse City area, all biodynamic organic farm where they grow their own tea, like real tea, black tea. And there's one kind of tea plant that can make black tea, white tea, and green tea. And they actually grow that plant. And when I found out about this, I was like, wait, what? How is that even possible? We live in Michigan. So I've gotten to know the owner, Angela. She's really cool. And apparently it's possible because they did a lot modifications of their farming environment to make it possible. A lot of hoop houses and warmth injected into times of year that would not have the growing conditions to grow tea. But I just think it's really cool that they're doing that up there. And it's also like a cool place to visit, and they do retreats and they have yurts that you can stay in and things like that. So I visited last summer or last fall, I think, and I'm hoping to visit again soon. Okay, so I'm going to dive in to the writing topic. I've got a few questions that I'm going to answer. So the first question came from Carol, and she asked whether I have a formula for when I'm writing like an essay or if it's mostly a stream of consciousness. And I'm going to say that now I do have a formula. I've been doing this for decades. So especially in the context of like an Instagram post, I know roughly how much space I have. I wrote a parenting column for quite a long time that was weekly, so I had to really crank content out. And the articles had to be between 750 and 800 words. So when you write for a length, after a while, you do start to get kind of the feeling of like, I have about this much space to set the scene. I have about this much space to express the idea. I have about this much space to wrap it all up. So in those contexts, I wouldn't say formulaic. I just kind of know going in, here's vaguely what I'm trying to say. Here's about, and it's almost intuitive, like here's about how much space I have to say that. And I still go over almost every single time, and I have to put I use like a online character counter. I have to put my stuff in there, and then I have to trim because I always write long. It's harder to write short. It's really hard to write the way I like to write in such a limited space. But stream of consciousness happens though, and that's really more like when I'm first fleshing out an idea. Often it happens in my actual head. I walk and talk to myself or stare off into space, or we'll think through an idea. And if it's the kind of thing I want to write about, but I don't have a succinct nugget of an idea yet. Like I don't have a thing that's an Instagram post. It feels bigger than that, but I don't know how big. I usually will put it in a Google Doc, or maybe I'll start a post on WordPress in my blog and just start writing. And what I find happens is that there's still a nugget of an idea, but often it branches off and then it starts to turn into 3 different ideas. And that's when I have to say, okay, this is not one idea, this is 3 ideas. And I will literally cut and paste parts. I will take the parts out that don't fit and put them in a different document or in a different WordPress post just to keep them because they're still valuable and I want to develop them at some point. But you do have to start developing the innate ability to know when something doesn't belong in this piece of writing. It belongs somewhere else. And that just takes practice. It takes showing up and doing it again and again because it really does start to become almost like a muscle memory or an intuitive feeling about where this piece is going, how much. I don't actually believe, like people say no one has attention span anymore. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think people will read a longer piece of content, but what they don't want to read and maybe have never wanted to read, and now that we have options, we don't have to. No one wants to read something that's 3,000 words long and is meandering all over the place. And then at the end, you're like, what? Where did that even go? So I try really hard not to do that. If there's something where I need to make multiple points, maybe it's a series of blog posts, maybe it's a book. And that's something that I'm really just starting to like tiptoe back into is book writing because it had been so long. It had been so long since I had even approached a book project that I have now so many ideas dumped in a Google Doc and I don't know exactly which one of them is going to, I guess, like be uncovered through this process. I am starting Beth Kempton's book proposal masterclass tomorrow. I'm really excited about that. I think it's going to help me just figure out which of these ideas do I actually want to move forward with and what's the best way to do that right now. So I hope that answered your question, Carol. I guess the answer is both and. Okay, question from Elizabeth. She asked, do you write at different times of day is what she said. I think what you're getting at, Elizabeth, is like, when do I write? Or do I have a specific time of day I write? Or is it kind of all over the place? Right now, because I'm still running a podcast business and I still have lots of other obligations and writing is no longer my main moneymaker. When writing was the thing I was doing every day to earn an income and to earn a living and to pay bills and keep a roof over my kids' heads, then I was like writing every single day. And that was what I did. I would, get up, get the kids off to school, whatever I had to do. And then I would sit down at my desk and I would write. And I would write until I, was done writing, until there was nothing left to do that day, till I ran out of time, whatever. And that was my day. Now it's much more fragmented. And it's interesting to me how challenging it's been to get back in that rhythm now than it even was 20 years ago when I was so singularly focused. Like then I had this urgency. I want to be a writer because it's going to get me out of this life I'm in that I don't like. And getting paid as a writer was a path for me to do that. Now it's kind of like, oh, it'd be great if I got paid as a writer, but I don't need it. And then where do I fit it? And so to answer your question very sloppily, right now, that is a work in progress. I have found that weekends are really good. I spent almost all day yesterday writing because on a Saturday, no one's emailing me and no one's like asking me to do anything else. And I had the time and my kids are not here this weekend. So I was just writing like all day and that was great. I was able to get in that zone. I think that in the future, it'll probably end up being a mix of weekend writing and like early morning or some period of time where it's like, I've got 2 hours. I don't think anyone's going to be emailing me or needing me for anything. However, if I decided to think that someone needed me for something, it'd be very easy for me to psych myself into that, to like feel like someone actually does need me. Who can wait, you know? So a big part of this is me putting boundaries around my own time, turning off. I've already got notifications silenced on my phone at all times, but I look at my phone, and if I see a banner, like the little one notification that tells me that something's going on, I'm kind of wanting to click it. So last week on Friday, I did a bunch of writing as well, and I just took those apps off of my home screen for a few hours, and I just put my head down and worked. So there are ways to kind of trick myself. I haven't quite nailed down what that schedule will look like, but I'm working toward it. It helps to have a project. It really helps to have a very specific thing I'm working toward, because if I could be doing anything, it's very easy to do nothing. Elizabeth asked a follow-up question. When writing was more of a job, did it take some of the fun out of it? Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, it was still fun, but just like anything that you're doing because you have to versus just wanting to, there does become that conflict between, okay, here's the stuff I would love to be writing and working on, and here's the stuff I have to. And I just think that's life. Like there's hardly anything I do, even hobbies that are truly just for the joy of it, where there's not some obligatory part, you know, even something like camping. You know, there's parts of camping that aren't that fun, but you do them to get to the fun part. Or if you have sporting goods, like if you love to ice skate, you have to clean the blades on your skates, right? So there's just always like maintenance and parts of anything that you need to do. So I think what was most frustrating for me when writing was it was basically my whole job was just like getting paid to write, is that I felt like it didn't leave a lot of time for like more passion projects or things that I loved to do. There just wasn't enough time in my day. I also had really little kids then, so I had to maximize my time, and that could be a little frustrating, but still very fun. I think probably the best little window of time I had as a writer was like 2010 to 2013, where I was blogging primarily. So I've had paying freelance work still, but I was blogging almost every day, 4 or 5 times a week. And I was earning money through my blog, and everything seemed to feed together. So the stuff I was doing for clients fed that work. I loved the blogging I loved writing about my life and my kids and all that. That was so fun. So that was like a little golden window where everything kind of felt like it came together and made sense. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to recreate now, moving forward into whatever this new version of my writerly life is at 45. Okay, so next question. This one comes from Stephanie. Stephanie and I go way back. She is one of like my original blogging friends way back in the day. And now she has an awesome podcast with another friend, Heather King, and their podcast is called Hearty, and you should check it out. They're really cool. Stephanie asks, where is the sweet spot, or how do you find the sweet spot? I can't exactly remember how you phrased this, Stephanie, but I thought it was very insightful. It was like, how do you give the audience what they want without giving too much away? And that's definitely difficult. I think that takes a lot of practice, really good boundaries, but also a willingness to be vulnerable. And I think some people are really good at having boundaries, and some people are really good at being really vulnerable. But there's like that spot in the middle, because I saw it play out in blogging, and now I'm seeing it play out in the social media world, where if you share everything, and people do want your real story. They want you to be raw. They want to feel like they can connect. But if you share everything all the time, there can start to become almost like an obligation to do that all the time, or where the audience can feel kind of entitled to it, or like if you don't then do it, you're being secretive or holding things back. And I think that balance is really hard. I think for me, it's always helped to talk a little bit in generalities about my experience. Where it comes to kids, it helps to have 5 kids, because I rarely have to name one. That does create a layer of distance buffer between my work and my actual children. I think when writing about motherhood, I've been really careful not to make my kids like the star of anything. They're like family members. They're all characters in my story, but I don't actually have to tell you what they're doing every day. I don't have to make it all about them. And then that gives them some privacy and some ability to be able to opt in or out of how much I share about them. Again, I'm not perfect at this. I know there's times I've probably shared too much and then my kids got mad about it. I know that for a fact because they told me. I'm sure there's been times I've shared too much about myself, and probably for me, honestly, too little. I think there's probably times I've held back stories that I could have told because I didn't feel ready to talk about them because they felt too vulnerable. So Steph, I know that you're also someone who's good at this, and I feel like, but also probably like me have struggled with it as your kids have gotten older, and you maybe go in one direction and then pull back and go in the other direction. And I think that for me, it's just an ongoing thing. I always have to readjust and ask myself, like, at this point of my life right now, how much am I willing to share? How much do people need to know? How much if I don't share it, am I sort of like shooting my own story in the foot and not letting it, and hobbling it and not letting it really grow and blossom? An example would be dating. I didn't talk much publicly about dating at all. And in fact, Eric and I were together for a really long time before I sort of debuted him first on the Mom Hour podcast and then kind of teasing him in stories. Actually, maybe I was teasing him on Instagram and stories and then maybe talked about it in the podcast and then kind of wrote a post like, this is where I am in my life. And that was a level of protection for both of us because he didn't ask for this level of like attention, and he didn't ask to be like part of my platform, and I don't need a fledgling new relationship to be out there for scrutiny or people's curiosity. Same with parenting things. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened over the last 5 years that people watching this right now won't ever know about. And that's not because I don't value people who read my stuff or watch my stuff or listen to my stuff. It's just like, it's not all public consumption, and it's not even all my story to tell. So I don't think I answered the question, Stephanie, except to say it's hard. And I think it takes practice, and I think it takes a lot of gut checks. And also knowing what you're bringing to the table. If you're writing things about, if you're writing things that are really more like researched, service-oriented stuff, no one needs to know anything about your personal life. If you're writing fiction, I don't think anyone needs to know anything about your personal life. If you're writing personal essays, they need to know something about your personal life. But how much you share is kind of up to you. And I think putting some distance between you and the thing that happened and waiting to see what parts of it you might still be open to telling 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road is really smart. I've read some really amazing memoirs that are raw and incredible to read and very personal and very intimate, but that writer had the benefit of time to decide what needs to be told, what can be held back, what advances the story, and what would just be sort of sensationalist. Like, there's all those things can only happen with time. If I had tried to tell a divorce story while I was going through it, it would have been like reality TV. So I guess there's a place for that too. It's not for me. Okay, and then Michelle asked how to get started. That's also a tricky question to answer, how to get started as a writer, because it so depends on what kind of writing you want to do. So I guess the first and most obvious and cliched thing to say is you just have to write. You have to show up and write. And the more you do that, the more you show up for yourself in the page and the words, the better your writing will get, the tighter your writing will get, the easier it gets. It becomes habitual. It doesn't take as long of just like staring at the screen and say, what do I want to write about today? There's a lot that just showing up every day creates just like the ability to jump in and start. I think if you're hoping to get paid as a writer, then the next piece is different than if what you're wanting to do is write more personally. Because if you want to write more personally, you can do that just here on Instagram. You can do it on your blog. You can submit little things here and there when you have a chance, and you don't have to stress out or put pressure on yourself to make them marketable topics. So depending on your first step is always right. And I guess maybe the second step is figure out what your next goal is. And if it is to get published in places that will pay you for your work, then you're going to do some research on that. And that's going to look really differently than if that's not the right word, really different than if your goal is to simply be more writerly in the way you approach things like social media. I think some of that is a mindset shift. If you're used to using social media to post a picture and a couple of words, it might feel really awkward the first time you sit down and try to write something that feels like a mini essay. People will notice. Maybe you'll feel a little bit like a fraud or an imposter. And I think you just have to push through that, because if you're a writer, if you are one who writes, you are a writer. So own that and be willing to put stuff out there that people are like, what's all these paragraphs? I posted the other day, I cross-post a lot of my stuff from Insta to Facebook because I just am not as active on Facebook anymore. I used to be, but I don't love the platform that much, and it's a real different mix of people over there than it is here. So this is, Instagram is like kind of my social media people. Facebook is, and I'm sure everyone has this experience, Facebook's everybody. Facebook is like people I went to high school with, people who people I've worked with in the past, just like a really different mix. And I posted like a little mini essay over here and then just pushed it over to Facebook, and I got some nice comments and people saying, oh, this is so nice. It was the one about Eric and I. And then I got a comment from someone I kind of know who she's like, Cliff's Notes, please. I thought, okay, that's kind of funny. Like, I wrote it this way on purpose. I didn't just write a long rambling thing about meeting a guy for the fun of it, because it's not an announcement. It was like an essay. It was a piece of writing. Another guy that I kind of know from like a different, like he's the husband of a friend who I know from like a totally different group of people, said something like, wow, your Facebook posts are always so well thought out, and you just choose really good images with them. I just feel like you put more thought into it than most people. And again, it was like a compliment and it was really nice, but I was laughing because I thought, well, yeah, I did that because that's what I do. Like, I'm a writer. So what I do is I write and I choose accompanying imagery that supports the word, that support the words that I'm writing. And that was very intentional. I don't just accidentally write flowery Facebook posts. It just kind of made me laugh, because I do think if you kind of embrace approaching things as more of a writer and not just a broadcaster or a person who shares details about your life or asks questions. There's lots of ways to use social media, and they're all great. And I've used them all at all platforms in different ways from time to time. But if what you're doing is sitting down to share a story from your life, some people won't get it, not because they're terrible people, but because they're like, oh, okay, this is weird. That's not what I'm here for. And that's fine. Those people can scroll on past, and they don't need to react or respond or, comment or like it or anything. They can just go on past. It's not about that. It's about you doing this for you. So that's like a really long way to kind of, again, not exactly answer the question, because not Elizabeth, it was Michelle, sorry. I am not 100% sure what kind of writing you want to do, but I do always think the first step is just showing up and writing. And that's the same whether you want to be a, magazine journalist or an essayist or a fiction writer. Writing is the thing that makes you a writer. And all the rest, I think you can learn with practice, research, make friends, make connections. Relationships in the writerly world are so helpful. And honestly, I can really, credit almost all of my writing success with the combination of me working hard and me connecting with other people who helped me. Like those two things. Everything else is just kind of, gravy. It's nice to get, but those were like the two ingredients that really made the biggest difference. So I hope this has been helpful. I am out of time and I'm out of questions, but if you have like another question right now, I can try to grab it. I did want to tell you guys that I'm going to be in Hawaii this week. Very impromptu, my stepbrother and his family are going to be staying in my sister-in-law's parents' condo out there, and they invited me to come visit. And I've never been to Hawaii, never really thought I would go to Hawaii, but I didn't have the kids that portion of the week, so I leave Thursday really, really early. We'll basically be traveling all day Thursday, and then I come back middle of next week. So I'm not sure if I'll do Sunday morning tea next week. I'd like to, though. The time difference will be weird, and I just want to make sure that I am connecting with family out there and stuff like that, and I don't want to put anything on the schedule right now. But I do think that there's a chance I will show up in some other way live, even if it's not Sunday morning around the same time. Oh, thank you for the compliment on my mug. So this is another David's Tea mug. I also love this. I have one like this, and I have one where it's more like a winter scene and there's snow. David's doesn't seem to be selling these same mugs anymore. I went on yesterday and I could not find half the mugs I bought from them in the past, the Nordic mug and the Perfect mug. I couldn't find any. So, except for in a holiday gift set. So maybe they're phasing them out. I still have like 6 in my closet, like my tea-wear closet, still in the boxes, which I think they're all kind of fall and winter themed. So I'm going to wait and do a giveaway of them next winter. And by that point, maybe they'll be collector's items if David's isn't doing them anymore. Oh, and thank you, Chelsea, about my nails. I actually think I have the nail polish. Yes, I do. This is Essie Sunday Fun Day. And I also use the Essie top coat, and that really helps keep them looking good. Okay, so yes, Hawaii, I will check in some way from there, and I'm looking forward to that. And also 2 more things. If you are interested in hearing more about writing, I am going to be talking with Joanne Roelis Diaz, who is a contributor on the Mom Hour team, in this Tuesday's episode of the Mom Hour. She and I chat about being mom writers because she is a widely published author, and her career has taken a different turn than mine. She's a children's book author. She writes a lot for educational publishers like Scholastic and things like that. And she is awesome, and we had a really good talk. Like, her kids are younger, my kids are older. So it was just kind of a nice conversation about 2 different paths you could take as writers. And we talk a lot about how we got started in our individual niches and how we've developed those niches and what we're doing in the future, but also kind of the realities of being a mom who writes around their kids, which for me, of course, is totally different than it was when I got started and literally had small children like climbing all over me all the time while I was trying to write. And I used to have the keys would be plucked off my keyboard on my computer because I would always be holding or nursing a baby, and they would like use their free hand to mess with the keys on my keyboard, or their toes sometimes would like click on the board, on the keys, and then I'd end up with just a bunch of gobbledygook. So anyway, very different writing life for me now, but both kinds are possible and rewarding in their own way. And sometimes you just have to be a little more judicious with the way you use your time when your kids are really little. So this has been really fun. Thanks for everyone who joined, and I will see you at some point next week.